And good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Wednesday, 5th of June 2024 Agenda Forum. Thank you for coming this evening. And we begin by acknowledging the City of the Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and their descendants. Just to let you know, the terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted at the entry of the public gallery, and members of the public are advised to read them prior to attending the meeting and abide by them. Tonight's attendance and apologies. We have Councillor Knight as an apology and leave of absence for Councillor Howlett and Councillor Miles.
Councillor Dawn will be late.
And Councillor Dawn will be a little bit late. So tonight, declarations of financial and proximity interests and interests affecting impartiality. We had Mr Stephen Kane, the CEO, declared an impartiality interest in item 15.2, and Councillor Bowman, revocation motion to revoke the appointments to the CEO Performance Review Panel, as he has raised concerns on the issue of bias by some panel members.
I've got two,
Deputy Mayor?
15.1 and 15.2.
Sorry, what was that?
15.1 and 15.2.
Thank you. If you can just hand them over to the CEO. We move on to 5 petitions. There were nil tonight, and part 6, reports and notices of motion. 6.1, there was nil additional information from officers. And tonight we have some deputations. 6.2, in accordance with the current procedures for public participation at agenda forums, all requests for in-person deputations were required by 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 4th of June 2024. And all written deputations received by 3 p.m. Tuesday, the 4th of June 2024, were circulated with a preliminary agenda on Tuesday evening. We move on to 14.2.2, response to parking petition of Leslie Road, Middle Swan, which you'll find on page 77. And we have in-person deputations, first by Ms Raylene Pacello, not in support of the officer's recommendation. Hello, Raylene. Thank you. If you'd just like to turn on the microphone, and you have 3 minutes. Is it coming on? Maybe not. Just a slight technical hitch there, Will. We'll just get a nice fresh battery to make sure it lasts the night. No good? Do we need to go and have a look? One moment. Is it better? Do you want to pull it down a bit lower? There you go. Oh, test it? Okay.
One, two, three.
Oh, we're back in action. Thank you, Raylene. And we'll start at 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and councillors. I represent the residents affected by 14.2.2 response to parking petition, Leslie Road, Middle Swan, requesting installation of restricted parking along Leslie Road. In response to our petition, the City of Swan staff recommendation proposes in point 1 that 4 no parking road or verge signs be installed on both sides of the road, on the corner of Richardson Road and Leslie Road, Middle Swan. I object to point 1 being the no parking on the road or verge signs installed on both sides of the road, and I request an amendment to the recommendation, which is to install distinct parking signs. The Western Road side should have no parking road or verge, which is the bushland side, and the Eastern Road side have simply no road parking, which is the resident side. The reason is that the no parking for road or verge signs on the eastern roadside will adversely impact residents, and the houses closest to the corner would no longer be able to park legally on their verge. Leslie Road is not a long street, and the impact of the rise overflow parking is disproportional to the number of residents. The limited response from the City of Swan and the RISE network to address the residents' concern is disappointing and frustrating. Yesterday, the RISE property manager sent an email to Mary Despot stating, and I quote, "We have again instructed staff to park along the road and not on the verge, as the wet weather is back and parking on the Midland Brick verge becomes very muddy and cars are not able to park there during winter." End quote. This statement, I feel, is shameful, as it shows that RISE Network are not serious about resolving the parking issues for their employees, nor their visitors, and nor the Leslie Road residents. This winter, Leslie Road will be a much larger parking issue, and if recommendation point 2 is adhered to, the parking patrols will be kept rather busy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raylene. We'll take questions now. Councillor Podovnik, did you have a question for Raylene? Or...
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's a question just for me. Thank you. But do you want to just wait there? And there might be another question. Thank you.
It's actually to Raylene, through you, Madam Mayor. Are you able to email that statement to all councillors?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you.
Got a
Councillor
question.
Bowman had a question first, and then Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Raylene. Raylene, has it been an increase in the number of cars parking there over the last few years? Because obviously planning approval was 2008, or has it been just in recent times?
It's been I've been there for 4 years, and it has definitely increased in the last few years. There's particular days that are specifically poor. We're keeping a record of days on the different days. Some days there can be 30, 40, up to 50 cars parked along the verge and on the road, staggered like either on the verge or half on the road. And there's also them parking the wrong way and then using the residents' verge to park. So they're just parking wherever they can. So...
And if I understood you correctly, it's obviously regarding recommendation 1, which was to install no parking signs on the corner of Richardson Road and Leslie Road. Are you aware that already the Road Traffic Act 2000 and also the city's parking local laws already provides restrictions for that, so people wouldn't be able to park there anyhow? So my understanding was that recommendation was to make it more obvious for those perhaps didn't know the Road Traffic Act. So you're aware that people aren't supposed to be parking there already?
Yeah. We want to know this. I'm responding with this deputation specifically to the what was recommended by the council staff. So we had asked for the parking restrictions to be put all the way along Leslie Road, but when the staff have come and looked at it, they've just focused on the bend, which is the point where Richardson and Leslie Road meet, and that is a real seriously traffic hazard, but people should know that they shouldn't be parking there anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I guess what you're after, Raylene, is to change the officer's recommendations so that residents are allowed to park on their own verges. Is that right?
Correct.
All right, and maybe if the staff can advise on this, if you've got a no parking on road sign, it does mean that residents will be able to park on their verge, and that parking by other people on that verge could be controlled by the residents by either using SnapSense Hov or calling 9267 9267. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm asking the staff.
Questions to staff will be at the end.
Well, it makes it
Sure.
easier if we ask now.
So questions to staff will be at the end.
Well, this might be the end.
So, no, it's not the end. So, are there any other questions at all for Ms Pacello? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Swan Valley, of course, covered this area since, well, before we did the change of boundaries, and we've covered this many, many times. So the question is, you have no problem with people parking on the west side of the road? It's mainly the side of the road where the houses are?
No, incorrect. We don't actually, our request, our petition was to stop people from parking all the way along Leslie Road. But on the residents' side, that the residents could still park on the verge, but it's all the way along. And this deputation was just responding to what the recommendation was from the council staff, which haven't really addressed what we asked.
Okay, I get that, but I have a feeling there's going to be a compromise on this. Would you accept parking on the western side of Leslie?
We would continue to fight that because it's still not safe, and it's not good for the residents. All the rise people that have got young women with prams wheeling babies up and down the street. It's a bigger issue than just the residents here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor, is there any further questions for Ms Basello?
Can I just repeat the first part of my question?
Is this a question to Ms
Yes,
Basello?
that's what I said. So yeah, Raylene, the question is, what you want is the ability to continue to park on your own verge.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I do have a question for staff.
Thank you very much, Ms Basello, and you'll find that that's okay. Thank you very much. There was also a written deputation attached from Ms Mary Despot, not in support of the officer's recommendation. We move on to 14.3.2, State Administrative Tribunal.
Question, don't we do questions for staff after the deputations?
Deputy Mayor, you'll find 6.3 councillor questions in regard to items on the agenda at point 6.3. Thank you. So we move on to 14.3.2, the State Administrative Tribunal, S.31, reconsideration, which is the refusal of the industry extractive lot 201, number 165 Reen Road, Gidgegannup, DA 920-22 on page 168. And we have in-person deputations first by Ms Sally Block on behalf of the Gidgegannup Progress Association Incorporated, not in support of the officer's recommendation. Evening, Sally, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you. Can you find the button just there? Down the bottom? Oh, thank you, Councillor
It's quite
Bowman.
simple, really, isn't it? Just need to be intelligent.
No, that's fine.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors. My name is Sally Block, representing the Gidgegannup Progress Association, Inc. GPA. The GPA wishes to object to the officer's recommendation that this development application be approved subject to conditions. This development application came before Council on the 15th of November 2023 and was rejected by all but 2 of the councillors. This current application seems to differ very little from the application that was made last year. We cannot see that extracting down to 1 metre of rock or fire breaks and then returning crushed rock to the fire break is going to improve the fire break very much for accessibility. This could result in different levels between the fire break and the surrounding land, undermining boundary fences and erosion. We also fail to see why extra fire breaks are needed except for increased rock extraction. The exercise seems to be all about providing rock to be used in the landowner's landscaping business, which is undertaken elsewhere in Gidgegannup. Having lived in Gidgegannup for nearly 40 years on a landscape-zoned block, we find the rock on the fire breaks to be no problem in getting around the property in farm utes and RTVs. Even when the Wooroloo bushfire nearly took our property out 3 years ago, bulldozers were very effective for allowing the fire trucks to navigate the place. There is still the need for this to be monitored by the community. Notice is erected when extractive industry is working. No acknowledgement of the impact this is going to make on sensitive developments, neighbouring properties, special rural subdivision on Reen Road, where building has now commenced on the subdivision. This proposed extractive industry is going to impact all these people. There is also the point the licence is for 5 years, and this can then be renewed. How many metres will we be down to on the fire breaks by that time? Number 165 Reen Road is a relatively small property, 130 acres. The buffer zones are inadequate. An interesting point that has arisen since last November is that at the March 2024 Council meeting, item 14.2, Community Planning and Development 14.2.1, Consent to Advertise Draft Law LPS number 118 was tabled. This meant that this was noted in the table 4 that landscape zoned holdings would become known as rural small holdings. Looking at page 170 of that item, there's the zoning table. Rural small holdings were landscape. The use classes on that for industry extractive have now become an X-use. So it seems that LPS 18 is getting it right. So will that have any impact on the length of time that this development could be approved, if it is to be approved? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was right on time. Thanks very much, Sally. Now, do we have any questions for Ms. Sally Block from councillors? Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Block, for your deputation. I believe Mr. True came to a GPA meeting to answer questions and offered 2 GPA members to come to the site and to see the fire breaks firsthand. Did you or any of your members take up that offer and attend the property?
I didn't personally, because I'd already seen the property and the fire breaks, not actually on the property, but from an adjoining property. So I was well aware of what the site was like. One other member did go along, I believe, but I haven't had any report from him.
Okay, a further question, thank you, Mayor. Have you spoken to neighbours in the area who would be most affected in the event of a bushfire, particularly the immediate neighbour at the monastery?
I haven't. I've spoken to some of the neighbours. We're all very wary that we can be impacted by bushfire at any time. It doesn't really give us too much notice. It just tends to happen. The nuns at the monastery actually are members of the Progress Association, so they're aware of the actions we're taking. They also do a lot of very active burning off of their premises, helped by the local fire brigade. They are very proactive to stopping bushfire.
Fantastic. And one more question, thank you, Mayor. Are you aware of any other extractive pursuits that have been carried out on neighbouring properties in the area over recent years?
I'm not actually aware. There was Catalanos carried out an extractive industry between Reen Road and Reserve Road. That has now ceased. I think they ran out of land because one of the adjoining property owners objected to this so much he bought the last bit of land.
I see. Thank you very much, Mrs.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any other questions for Ms. Block? No? Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Wayne Best, not in support of the officer's recommendation. And welcome, Mr. Best, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name is Wayne Best and I've got my wife with us, Kerry. My property is 151 Reen Road. We have owned it and lived there for the last 45 years. I would like to object to this proposal. The officers are presented with all the measures that were rejected by the majority last year. There is an extensive fire report and vegetation assessment, but at the end of the day, it is still going to be an extractive industry. I maintained the fire breaks for 10 years for the previous owner of lot 165. The fire breaks were quite adequate and are to run any size fire vehicle. I have had 25 years experience in the volunteer bushfire brigade, so I am well aware of what is required. For the past 6 months, we have enjoyed the peace and quiet while sitting outside without hearing or viewing trucks along our boundary. We strongly object to the city, strongly urge the City of Swan to reject this proposal so we can enjoy our retirement years, and in the rural lifestyle we are all enjoying in Gidgegunnup. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Best. Councillors, are there any questions for Mr. Best? Councillor McCulley.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Best. When we had the SAT meeting at the applicant's address, I viewed some photos of extensive extractive works carried out at your address. Those photographs indicate extractive works were carried out at your property, and not just fibre breaks, but more than half your property. So over what period of time did the works take place on your property, and did you have an approval?
No.
Okay.
No, he was invited there. He said he'd be 6 months. He removed the rock that was stockpiled through previous clearing work and that. He removed that rock. He was to be finished in 12 months. Was not completed. It took another 12 months for him to leave the property. Took me the next 2 years to clean up after him.
Okay, so
We didn't do fire breaks. He started to extract out the bush. I had to stop that because of the killing of trees. Realised very quickly he was just ripping tree roots as well as rock.
Do you have a further question, Councillor McCulley?
yes, thank you, Mayor. In the period of time the screening on your block was undertaken, Mr. Best, is it correct to say that the screening was only about 150 metres from your house?
I expect it was more than 150 metres, but we had discussed this, my wife and I. Because it was to be 6 months, we were prepared to put up with the dust and noise for 6 months, and he moves on.
So,
He just moved the other side of our fence.
and you are aware that the same screening machinery will be 850 metres from your house in this application?
Yes, but it's only metres, very short distance from the edge of our property. So it is alongside our property, and all the transporting is within 8 metres of our rainwater collection.
One further question, thank you, Mayor. I do note that the grounds for your objection do regard dust and noise, and I believe you have a cattle transport business and you do park your truck in a shed near the house, and the driveway and the pad is gravel. So are you aware that the applicant has offered to install a bitumen driveway, plant trees, and also to mitigate dust and noise from your cow and cattle trucks? Have you considered similar dust and noise mitigation?
That truck, it most probably moves once a week to do transport. It travels at about 10 k's an hour, right? Planting of trees, most of that will be under power lines to our property and up against the boundary fence, which degrades your fire breaks because they're constantly dropping limbs on the fire breaks, leaves, everything. So that's not an advantage, having trees planted there.
Thank you, Mr. Best. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Best? No? Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
Next we have Mr. Aaron True in support of the officer's recommendation. Welcome, Mr. True, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors and staff. My name is Aaron True and I am deputising in support of recommendations that council resolve to approve our application for an extraction licence to improve our fire breaks. I appreciate the councillors' time to reconsider our application and to give time to attend our property and assess the fire breaks firsthand. I'm confident that we have now addressed all the matters previously raised by council, and it is our intention to strictly follow the guidelines set out in the revised application, so as to respect the concerns of the council and the wider Gidgee community, which I've been a part of since 1994. We have further consulted with our closest neighbour, the Dharmasama Nuns Monastery, who abut our northern boundary and with whom we have a great relationship with. After conducting their own inspection of our property, they have provided a letter of support for our proposal, which I've already circulated via email to all the councillors. My email to the councillors also included letters of support from other neighbours and prominent community members in Gidgegannup. We have incorporated Firebreak 3A in response to Councillor Henderson's suggestion to slightly divert one of the firebreaks. This has enabled us, as part of the revised application, that the natural regrowth in the northern section of the existing alternative firebreak can remain. As a result, no vegetation clearing is required within the regrowth area, and only a small portion of vegetation needs to be pruned to facilitate Firebreak 3A. All other internal firebreaks are to remain in the same positions as they were set out in the original 1998 approved subdivision applied for by the Best family. I can only assume that these internal firebreaks were required as part of the original bushfire plan for the property, considering the high fuel and the steep slopes, which obviously the councillors have now seen since the last meeting. In addition, the revised application includes extra tree planting along our driveway, more of the driveway to be sealed, the power line comes halfway along, more of the driveway to be resealed, the relocation of all the materials down to the centre of the property, and the environmental dust and noise reports have been updated to reflect this. We have consulted with the West Gidgee Fire Brigade and have again contracted their services to schedule out and carry out a second controlled burn on the property. This has been a difficult time, and we are now looking forward to being able to get back onto our property. If given approval, we will carry out the remedial fireworks set out in the revised application. This will allow us to feel bushfire prepared and safe in the event of an emergency, and will allow us to progress forward in making the property safe for our family and for a future home. Thank you again for your time and input for the revised application. We respectfully request your approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. True, for your deputation. Councillors, are there any questions for Mr. True tonight? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron, I have a written deputation in front of me that the person says there was no advertisement on your gate about your intentions and don't believe you've advertised their intention elsewhere. Have you spoken to the community, the neighbours and that? And I heard from Councillor McCulloch before one of those, but are people aware of it?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, look, obviously I'm pretty green to this as well. The first application, I didn't want to seem to be canvassing people, so I didn't actually approach people for the first meeting. Since then, I've learned a few lessons and spoken to a lot more people. Look, I played footy in Gidgee for 17 years. I'm games record holder up there. Like, I've sponsored I've been the major sponsor since 2010. So I'm very close to the community. I'm very close to a lot of the community members. So yeah, I have spoken to a lot of them. Yeah.
Okay, and from what I heard from Councillor McCulloch, you went to a Gidgegannup Progress Association meeting. Was that correct?
I did. Yeah, I did.
And how did that go?
I got a barrage of questions, but yeah, generally, they were respectful. I did at the time think that maybe some people would actually come out and take us up on the offer of actually seeing the firebreak. Unfortunately, from the Best property, as I think some of the councillors will have seen, you can't see the firebreak. That is the main issue that we have, which runs alongside the monastery, hence why the monastery is in support of us actually fixing that major firebreak.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I noticed in this application, it's very specific this time where those firebreaks are. It's a much more detailed plan as opposed to what I would consider was a previous mud map. You are aware that if this was approved, no doubt the city would be looking to make sure that's the only area you would extract from?
I am concerned, obviously, of a conflict of interest. We are contracted to the City Council. We have been since 2010. The city is one of our major clients. Unfortunately, I think sometimes that crossover does cause us issues. When people see our trucks, they might think that we're working on our property, as was the case with the bushfire cleanup. Traffic management people parked on our property so that they weren't in the bushfire zone. basically, there's no way I'm going to do anything to jeopardise my relationship with the City Council. I couldn't afford to.
And I noticed there's one new fire break. It's going to be 6 metre wide. And in the report I've got, there's no trees to be removed, but just tree pruning.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So Councillor Henderson suggested, and I hadn't given it any thought, I didn't really interfere with the original subdivision application from 1998, but Councillor Henderson suggested to, when we saw some of the regrowth, there is some old fences and metal that needs to be taken out of there, but that can be done without damaging any of the trees. And then we can utilise one of the paddocks.
Okay, and final question. What's the expected number of truck movements per week, and what would be the speed of your trucks going along the driveway?
We need to be respectful of the neighbours, so as slow as possible, between 10 to 20 kilometres an hour, and I know that's what he's asked for. I don't have a problem with that. As far as truck movements is concerned, it's actually not a large volume of material. We've said that to a max of 2 trucks a day, but there's going to be huge periods of time where there will be no truck movements whatsoever. So obviously all through the summer months there will be no excavation happening due to the bushfires.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from councillors for Mr True? Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr True. I did have a question about the fire breaks, but you have clarified those with the historical fire breaks. So did you ultimately take rock from Mr Best's property?
Yes, we did. I think I might have mentioned last time that we started fairly innocently, and I think you can imagine, like, when I was playing football, we actually, part of our fundraising was to actually go and pick rock off farmers' paddocks. We used to get paid as a football club to do that. So we started out pretty innocently, pretty small, and we were collecting rocks off farmers' paddocks to use in our landscaping business. And as you can imagine, we pretty well got inundated straight away, and every farmer wanted us to come and take the rocks off their paddock. And that was no different with Mr Best. We took the rocks off his paddock and then he asked us then if we could actually extract rock. So then we actually brought in bulldozers and we actually bulldozed all of his paddocks for him and took out the rock. I don't want to argue with some of the comments, but I'll just leave it at that. But we did take a lot of rock, probably 10 times what we're actually applying for right now.
Any further questions for Mr True?
Thank you, Mayor. No.
Thank you very much for your deputation and coming this evening.
Thank you.
Councillors, you have written deputations attached there. One from Mr Ian Stannard, not in support of the officer's recommendation, and 2, Mr Leslie and Ms Joanne Ormsby, not in support of the officer's recommendation, and 3rd, Ms Sue Dardis, not in support of the officer's recommendation. So thank you. That concludes the deputations. You're welcome to stay on and listen to the rest of the agenda forum. We move on to 6.3, councillor questions in regard to items on the agenda. And just a reminder, if there's any confidential items on the agenda, councillors, we will need to go behind closed doors. Councillor Bowman. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the staff who've already answered the questions I've submitted. Just in regards to 14.2.2, having now looked at the planning approval back in 2008, where there was 30 parking bays, but only required 22 parking bays. Obviously, the required 22 parking bays was potentially a bit low. Has anything changed from when the planning approval was approved that has increased the amount of parking on site?
Okay, I'll start maybe with Mr Bishop. Sorry, we're going to go Mr Russell first. It was going to be Mr Bishop. Through you, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Having looked at this in the past, I think we found that there has been nothing that has changed. There's been no supplementary development applications for this site subsequent to the 2008 approval that would have entailed the provision or need for more parking.
Councillor Bowman.
So then my question is, in the original application and planning approval, where officers in their report said that it only requires 22 car parking bays, noting that community use was not listed, so a different use was considered. Why was the report then, and I know it's hard to try and work out what was in minds back in 2008, saying it was only 22 needed, where we're hearing from residents that in addition to the 30 parking bays that are on site, there's up to 30 parking cars parked on the verge as well. It seems, nearly a 200% increase in what we thought was the parking. Have they intensified their use from what was previously we revised in 2008?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
First instance, I think to do that question proper justice, I'll take that on notice. 2008 is a long time ago. I've been in this chair for 12 years, and so we're talking about my predecessor. I wasn't involved with that application, but we're happy to review the report, although I think the salient fact is, nonetheless, the approval is there. I don't believe they have changed the nature of the use. It's always been the same type of use, and they were approved with certain conditions. The simple fact is, ultimately, parking standards, and I often refer to them as nominal standards that indicate a certain amount, okay? It is always possible for a particular land use in a business to generate more parking demand than what a planning scheme would have indicated needed to be provided. That is one of the dangers of nominal standards in relation to parking. So I think I'm happy to look into that and clarify if what Councillor Bowman is after is some greater exposition as to the thinking around the staff at the time. I can tell you it wasn't me that wrote the report, because I do have a good memory and I didn't do that, but I'm happy to look into that, the documentation, and provide some clarity around the assessment thinking. But I think the most important thing, Madam Mayor, is that is all moot, because it has been done and dusted, and as Mr Bishop's report conclusively articulates, it is compliant with the planning approval, and that, in a nutshell, is that.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Are there further questions, Councillor Bowman?
So just probably another part to add to that I'm happy to take on notice. We heard from the person making a deputation, and I asked the question, had it increased in parking? And my recollection was it was roughly 4 years ago there was a significant more increase. So would that not indicate that there's been either intensification or perhaps a change of use on the site? And can we have happy for it to be taken on notice if that was the case or has been the case, or they're just twice as popular now?
Thank you. Mr. Russell, if you're able to provide further information.
Yes, Madam Mayor. It is entirely possible that what you have is a circumstance where a business has simply engaged more staff, and if more staff choose to drive to a premises, you'll have more parking demand by people needing a place to park their cars. It is seldom the occasion that city staff place conditions on development applications that limit the numbers of persons. And we do that as a last resort because it connotates, as you would expect, it is the nature of a constriction on the capacity of a business to expand within its premises with more staff. So it has to be a very desperate circumstance to warrant us choosing to take the quite dramatic step of capping what I call the numbers of persons in a business in terms of staff. We will often cap the numbers of patrons to premises, frequently licensed premises and the like, but we rarely do so in terms of capping the number of staff. So I believe probably what we're dealing with when Councillor Bowman indicates an intensification, you'll probably find it is an intensification in the numbers of staff at this premises. And that's not a problem from a planning perspective, because that 2008 approval, and I know this, doesn't have a cap saying you shall have a certain amount of staff. So that may well be the logic. If the issue here is that all these cars parking along Leslie Street are staff of Rise, and I don't know whether they are or not, but if they are, then what we might be looking at is that Rise has expanded the numbers of staff that it employs so that you have more people going to the premises and needing to park. But that won't be a breach of the planning approval because, as I said, there's no conditions capping either the numbers of customers or the numbers of staff, and that might be the explanation for the circumstance if that's the scenario.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any other questions for staff? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, same subject. So 14.2.2 response to the parking petition. Will the proposed change that that Raylene has suggested to have no parking on road signs instead of no parking on road or verge outside of residents' homes, will that allow residents to park on the verge?
Through you, Mr Bishop.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I would like to respectfully just reaffirm Mr Russell's feedback. Staff, including myself, have actually engaged with this not-for-profit for many years to try and understand if there's been any significant change, and I cannot find any significant change in activity or any built form change, other than the fact that they are a successful not-for-profit business, and probably there have been more staff who are working there. They certainly have peaks of activity when they're bringing in staff from other locations for meetings and sort of training type functions. But from engaging with the CEO, they have voluntarily agreed to cease those activities and run those events at other locations just to try and reduce the impact. With regards to Councillor Johnson's question, as per the staff recommendation, it is proposed to put in no parking on road and verge on both sides. However, if it was of Council's view that it wished to allow parking on the verge on the residential side of that bend, having listened to the deputation and read the written deputation as well, we don't believe that that would cause a significant issue. The intent of the parking signage and no parking is to try and protect line of sight for safety reasons. Effectively, if a car's coming around the bend and a car's parked on the road, if you don't have line of sight, it can cause a safety issue. If, however, the signage is still there to prevent parking on the road on the bend, any parking on the residential side of the verge, that should present minimal safety issue, as long as the signage could still exist to prevent parking on the road on both sides, and I would suggest on the verge on the opposite side where there's no residential properties.
Okay, thanks. And I guess the next question is, will the residents then be able to control parking on their own verges using SnapSense or calling 9267 9267?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. That's always the case now. If anybody parks on your verge without your approval, you are perfectly entitled to report that, because that becomes an offence under the city's parking local law.
And one extra question. There is a map in the report, but I believe that's the map associated with the petition. Would it be possible for the city to provide a map as to where exactly the signage is going to go, so that the residents understand what's coming up? Because it's not 100% clear from the recommendation exactly where the signs are going to go.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm not sure if we'd be able to do that before the council meeting. Basically, we would need to go and do a more detailed site assessment and exactly to what extent it would, the restrictions would extend round the corner. I do have my colleague here, Mr Stenton, unless you can provide any further advice on what that likely the extension of the no parking would be on the bend. But ordinarily, for instance, at intersections, we talk about 10 metre setback or something in that sort of order around the bend.
Okay. Nothing further to add, Mr Stenton? Thank you very much. Councillor Henderson.
On the same matter, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just in respect of the road itself, I think Mr Coaten advised some years ago that it was going to undergo some reworks because it's all been undermined and the like. Was there a plan to do that in some future budget?
Yes, that is correct. That's coming up in the next year's budget, where the tree roots have been damaging the road and there is some reconstruction required.
Thank you. And that road is quite narrow at the moment, so I gather it will be widened towards the eastern side, which is the big wide verges. Is that how it would go?
The intention, and I can check this, but I'm fairly confident the intention is not to widen it, it's just to reconstruct the existing service.
okay.
It is 7.4 metres at the moment.
So
It's not-
can 7.4 accommodate parking on both sides of the road with enough space not to tear the side of a car? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillors, are there any further questions on other matters on the agenda items? Councillor Henderson?
Thank you. On, I'll start on 14.3.2, which was the Gidgegannup SAT reconsideration. Can staff advise what's the approximate size of the block?
Mr Russell?
I don't see it on the plans. 120 hectares or something?
The earlier report to council, Madam Mayor, had it at 52 hectares.
52 hectares.
Thank you.
So, thank you. The second question then from that is, so does this block size require multiple internal fire breaks?
The normal requirements for fire breaks for these types of properties is the normal perimeter fire breaks. But as we know, there is the opportunity for alternative fire breaks, as opposed to simply being the interior perimeters. Dependent upon any number of circumstances, you can apply for those.
Thank you. So I'll be more specific then. So are internal roads specifically fire breaks as required by council's annual fire break requirements?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I took that as a statement rather than a question.
Yeah, well,
Can you rephrase that question then, please, Councillor Henderson?
what I'm saying is, are the internal roads, which are being called fire breaks, but the internal roads specifically fire breaks as required by council's annual fire break requirements?
Through Madam Mayor, if the question is what's depicted as strategic fire breaks, are they requirements that we have specifically set as requirements under the fire break notices, then I'll take that on notice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any other questions for staff? Councillor Henderson?
On a different matter. 14.1.1, I raised this during the deputation, page 35, powers and duties and functions. And the issue that I raised when we did the briefing, should I say, was around the fire breaks notice that is produced annually is signed off as by order of the council, but the council doesn't make the decision. So I'm wondering how it is that we don't have that as part of this process, or are you seeking that I apply that as a notice of motion for the meeting?
Alternate motion. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr Bishop.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, yes, basically, as advised when this was discussed at the, I think it was the briefing, we are about to go out, or we may have already started, a consultation process on the proposed changes to the fire notice, which proposes an option that you would have a a split within the city between the sort of Swan Valley area and the Hills area with slightly different conditions attached. And what we're proposing to do is see what that feedback is and then bring that back through BFAC for consideration as to the new fire notice. However, notwithstanding that, it is entirely up to council if it wishes to do an amendment to the report for the report on delegations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do believe that it's fine that the BFAC does that and it does give its advice to the council. So I do think the council should make a decision on that advice as opposed to the CEO. So I'll be looking to, in some way, incorporate that. It's not here at the moment.
Thank you very much. Now, councillors, are there any other councillors who haven't asked a question of staff tonight on the agenda items? Deputy Mayor.
15.2.
Yep.
Move to go behind closed doors.
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor.
I second that. Thank you, councillor. Oops, start again there. Thank you. And to those who are watching at home, we've just come back from behind closed doors. And thank you to everyone watching tonight and those that attended in the gallery. And thank you to staff and councillors. And we'll close the meeting at 7:12 p.m. Thank you.